All right, everybody. This is In Liberty and Health. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me. I'm really excited for this conversation today. I won't keep you too long here. Make sure you hit all the links below to figure out what I got going on and find where you can follow my guest today. And without that, let's go. What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovic. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty, physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass.
Okay?
All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I'm absolutely honored to welcome Austin Petersen to the show. How you doing, man?
Hey, doing good, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I remember I heard of you probably when I was first getting into libertarianism almost 10 years ago now. And my brother had introduced you to me. And then I think I became a member of Austin's Secret Ninja Army Facebook group.
Yeah, it's the Freedom Ninja Army.
Yeah. Back in the day when, I guess we had a little bit more online freedom. So, you've had quite an interesting path over the last, I would say, a couple years, because I know you've kind of departed ways with the Libertarian Party, and I think for good reason. So, I guess give a little introduction for yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I initiated my political activism in around 2007, 2008, when I started volunteering for Congressman Ron Paul. And from there, I moved on to working in Washington, D.C. for the Libertarian Party, and was the volunteer coordinator, and then moved my way over to a think tank for a little while. That was the Atlas Foundation, which is kind of an international libertarian institution. Got a job back in New York City working for Fox. I was a producer for Judge Andrew Napolitano's show, Freedom Watch. And then basically committed myself to libertarian activism full time, started my own business. It's a liberty-based business. And I did an audio podcast for a number of years that was quite successful. Ran for office quite unsuccessfully as a libertarian candidate for president, and Republican candidate for U.S. Senate here in the state of Missouri. And then about a year and a month ago, I launched a new video podcast talk show called the Wake Up America Show. I had been doing talk radio, conservative talk radio, for a few years. And then I left to go ahead and start my own venture because the money's better and you're a lot more free. And you could say words like shit and hell and damn.
Beautiful. Yeah, I don't blame you. So kind of leaving out of the Libertarian Party, I know you kind of take swings at everybody in there for very, very good reason. I was once pretty involved, but it's kind of sad to see that, like, something that you would think is ideologically pure would be a little bit more successful, but it just seems like libertarians are a little bit too much in their own way to really get anything done. I'm guessing you probably felt something similar.
Yeah, I agree. I have no ill will towards my old friends in the Libertarian Party. I wish them well. Part of me wishes that there was a legitimate third party in the United States that challenged the Republicans and the Democrats. But then another part of me, right, is conflicted about that, because I see how the multi-party systems of Europe operate, and I say to myself, who on God's green earth would want to have that here? Because ostensibly, if we had, functioning third parties in the United States, they probably wouldn't be libertarian. They'd probably be socialist, communist, Greens, and all that. Because quite frankly, we are, libertarians intellectually, we're far outnumbered by our opponents and people who agree with more statist views and philosophies. So, perhaps we operate better functionally as a rump of the Republican Party and try and steer the ship, or act as a rudder to the cruise ship, and try and steer the Republican Party more towards libertarian philosophy and policies, like Ron Paul did, Rand Paul does, Senator Mike Lee and others like Thomas Massey are doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've almost come painstakingly to agree with that sentiment because I had high hopes for the Mises Caucus takeover, but it seems like that's kind of been relatively a flub, and no bones with any of the people who are doing that or who are in there. But it almost seems like if they put their efforts towards taking over more Republican chapters all across the country, that maybe they would have a little bit more success.
Perhaps, but I could understand why they embarked on the journey that they did in order to remove the elements of the Libertarian Party, which were embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
The leftist factions, even anti-capitalist socialist libertarians, for example, left libertarians who had dominated the Libertarian Party up until the time that I was there and then departed. So I can understand why they went on that departure, but unfortunately, sort of everything becomes a business or an industry at some point. So if a strategy isn't working, there's somebody who's started up a nonprofit or a for-profit, right, based around it, that's committed to, right, or their lives depend on ensuring that whatever project it is continues. And I'm not accusing anybody of grifting, but I am saying that, like, you can you can be looking out for your best interests and be doing what's in the country's best interests or in the idea your philosophical ideals, but then your motives do have to be questioned at some point. I think even myself, right, I run a libertarian podcast and a libertarian news site and a libertarian merchandise store. I profit from these ideas. So that you could accuse me, and I am accused of those same things. So it can be difficult sometimes to ascribe a motive to someone's behaviors and actions. But I am saying, though, that, like, if for some reason I were to suddenly actually be a closet socialist or a closet neocon or whatever, or something like that, it wouldn't be in my best interest to show that, because I profit from that, right? So you do have to kind of like wonder why sometimes failing institutions continue to go on. And a lot of it is just because, again, a lot of times people just want to be king of a little kingdom, even if it doesn't have any influence, right? So a lot of people would rather be the king of shit mountain, even if the mountain, shit mountain is like a pile of turds compared to that, something that's actually beautiful and meaningful and accomplishing something of worth, if that means you have to share power, or that means you have to share the attention of the spotlight. And that's something that I've really learned in the last 15 years, is that libertarians aren't immune to the same petty squabbling, the same petty fighting between groups that our opponents are. They just happen to be correct about political things, right? They happen to be correct about economics, but that doesn't change their human nature. Libertarians aren't automatically better people just because they happen to have the right ideas for governance. Many of them are actually, I know plenty of libertarians who I think are worse people than people who I know who are completely incorrect about politics.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. And that's something that I think a lot of people tend to miss in their political diagnoses, is that people are still people at the end of the day, and people are going to have incentives, and then we're going to have biases just the same as all other people. And this has kind of been something that I've kind of beat into at least the listeners of my podcast, is like, just because you see alt media doesn't mean that you should just trust them because they're doing the opposite of what the mainstream media is.
Oh, yeah.
I know you and I had a little bit of a back and forth, like in a good way, about seed oils. Well, the big thing in alt media right now is to bash seed oils and say they're killing you. Well, if you open a book or read a study on any of these things, like, oh, they're actually good for you. And when you read studies, you're going to see that they're actually cardioprotective. But just because, a whole bunch of, the dissident media jumped on keto, that now the mainstream media is starting to catch up to it. And now, of course, everybody says that this stuff's bad for you, but nobody, bothers to check.
It's the grift, right? So, I mean, again, there's, it's once you've invested your life savings and, your mansion depends on, your income, coming from selling books on naturalnews.com, you're not going to change your views. And people who have illnesses, for example, or especially people who have mysterious illnesses like autoimmune diseases and things like that, for which a doctor very rarely can give you a functional treatment or therapy for many of these diseases, right? People are going to go in search of some kinds of functions, and any snake oil salesman who's out there is going to capture, cast a wide enough net, and they're going to catch people in their claws. and sell them on a drink this homeopathic cure, right? 7 days a week, right? Or look at like the faith healers of like Southwest Missouri, for example. During coronavirus, they were selling that silver oil solution, right? Colloidal silver. Actually, colloidal silver is a big one, especially in libertarian circles, right? And that was one thing that and I realized too, and this is what I was kind of warning you about, is that early on in my career, my libertarian career, you really do put yourself in danger in not only questioning mainstream narratives because your relatives think you're a kook, but if you question alternative narratives, right, the water filter salesman narrative, right,
Yeah.
if you question, they will turn on you as well because one, it's an industry, it's a grift, and for many, it is a religion, it is a lifestyle, right? Imagine these people have set up their entire lifestyle around opposing seed oils, and then the problem is, I think, is that when people realize that they're wrong about things, and I was listening to a really good podcast today, a discussion between Carl Benjamin and Dave Rubin, where they were talking about Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks, and how she's kind of realized that like what her views have led to because she's kind of opposing the new wokeism to some extent. Yeah. It's really fascinating stuff. Definitely recommend it. And in it, they talked about this idea of why people have trouble, like even once they've realized that they were wrong about something. I mean, to get them to come out and admit that they are wrong is damn near next to impossible, because imagine like committing yourself to this, to something that you now see as evil, and you to look back and to who could admit that I've committed evil acts, I've done evil things. I mean, that takes, you're talking about moving mountains to get people to admit that they've done something wrong. I mean, not just like committed evil acts like the genital mutilation of children, but just evil acts like advocating for international socialism and violent socialistic policies or statist policies. It takes a lot to get someone to admit, hey, I was wrong about that. What I've done is I've committed I've advocated for atrocities to a certain extent, right? But seed oils is more of grift, right? You're really you're just ripping off people who don't know any better, right? And it's a shame. And unfortunately, most people don't have an open mind. If we did, we'd probably live in a freer world, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's funny, one of the people that helped change my mind on the whole seed oil conversation is a guy named Lane Norton. And he brings up this study that they did that they showed like Republicans and Democrats, both things that like would disprove a stance that they currently hold. And what they found is that I think an overwhelming majority of the time when they were given, counter evidence to what they believe, they actually doubled down on what they already believe. So, how do you toe that road? For me,
yeah. Good. Have you ever seen the we probably haven't, but there's a musical called The Book of Mormon. And in it, there's this song. You can watch it on YouTube. It's very funny. It's called I Believe. And he sings about like, I believe that the Garden of Eden was in Jackson County, Missouri, right? I believe that I'm going to have my own planet and that Jesus has his own planet and all these things, because he has this kind of crisis of faith in the show. And so when he starts asking all these questions, he says, I am a Mormon, and a Mormon just believes, right? So it's this, people are willing to take things on faith, right? And they'll take things on faith. So, and then they will, even when you show them something that conflicts with their views, they will then say, aha, just as I had always suspected, right? This only confirms everything I've already ever believed, right? And boy, I saw this back in the day with like the 9/11 truth movement and things like that. God. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what new evidence emerged about passports that didn't actually, that emerged that can actually burn, right? Or that jet fuel doesn't have to melt steel beams. It just has to make them weak enough to bend, right? It didn't matter. Any of these stuff. It's like, this only confirms, and now you're in on it, right? Like the times I've been called a globalist shill in my lifetime, just because, it doesn't matter. The problem is that everybody wants you to show their work. Everybody is that asshole math teacher who didn't care that you were able to get the equation right. Like I'm talking about libertarians specifically, or the alternative media, or people who are, opposed to mainstream narratives like ourselves, right? People like, or if you're, or religious people, right? They don't care if you believe what they believe ultimately the ultimate truth, if you agree on it, they want you to show your work, and you better show your work, motherfucker. You better not only believe what I believe, but you better believe it for the same reasons I believe it, and you better arrive at the same conclusions that I've arrived at the same way, or else excommunicate, right?
Yeah, it's so frustrating. And really, what a lot of people miss, specifically when, let's say something like 9/11, is that the misinformation actually hurts people, because now, you're essentially covering up what actual conspiracies and damage are actually being done, because you're throwing out so much misinformation that people now, are just complete. It serves the same purpose as basically the government disinformation, because now, the conspiracies go and they're hidden. So, like, when it comes to the, the COVID-19 treatment, I'm sure you know what I'm referring to. But when you hear people say that this is like, a device meant to, control the population, it's like, okay, well, now if I say like, hey, I'm against this, then people associate me with people who are saying that, when it's like, okay, well, there's evidence that it does harm some people, but I'm not going to go to the extent that you are, because I don't have data to back that up. But then, like you said, as soon as you say that, oh, well, you're in on it. Don't you know that, they would never make a study on this kind of stuff? It's like, no, they do. And you could support your own hypothesis, but you don't want to read the studies. You just want to have, a nice clickbait title and then move on to the next thing, and, just constantly feed me another narrative.
It's just such a shame that like things like vaccines have to become politicized, right?
Yeah.
The concept of being pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine is determinant of your political party. I want no part of that. I want nothing to do with that, right? And like, you have to be careful, because if you're going to tell people the truth, you have to make them laugh, or else they'll kill you. And like, I'm a little bit funny, but I'm not like a lot funny. And like, in order for me to survive with the political views and the beliefs that I hold, I need to be a whole lot funnier than I actually am. So like, I have to be careful, because I'm not funny enough to be totally honest and open about everything that I believe, because unfortunately most people are true believers, right? In some sense. And Americans especially, we are believers, not just like on a religious point or a fundamentalist point, but like, Americans want to believe, and part of it, there's a healthy aspect to it. Like, we believe in the American dream. We believe in like these constitutional principles and ideals and things like that, right? But to some extent, right, it's a luxury, right, that's built out of our largesse. But the negative aspect of it, of course, is that belief can and orthodoxy can quickly retard growth, intellectual growth, right? Like, we value orthodoxy rather than heterodox approaches and open-mindedness. And so unfortunately, I always thought that the problem is that we are, individualists. You would think that we would be less cultish, but in many ways, like, there's a kind of a cult of individualism, if you will. And people, they demand orthodox. People, like, somebody today was like, well, this is what Rothbard would think about that. Well, who gives a shit, right? Like, I don't care. At the end of the day, I used to really value, if this person said it, that means it must be true. But that's a fallacy, right? People can be brilliant people and right about a lot of things, and wrong about a lot of things as well, right? I don't agree completely with Murray Rothbard about certain things. I don't agree completely with Friedrich Hayek about a lot of about everything but those are the closest to my ideological view. And I guess, like, I'm more willing now as I get older, and I'm thinking even more deeply about my views, and re-examining what I believe again, because I frequently will re-examine my beliefs to ensure I'm being logical. I'm more willing to sort of not accept absurdities or accept contradictions so much as to at least like have peace with them, and realize that while this libertarian thought contradicts this libertarian thought, and Ayn Rand says that reason can't contradict reason, okay, that's fine, but I can't solve all of the problems of the world. And one of the things too that, like, I think being overly analytical sometimes is that we lose like an aspect of a trusting of our gut. This is something I've spoken with my wife about recently, because we talked about how you can sort of reason yourself, reason a hole in your head, right, that your brain can fall through. And it's not to say that I don't reject reason at all. I consider myself to be a very reasonable, logical person. But like, if your position, if you're logicking yourself in a position of, well, I think maybe it's okay if a biological male in a dress follows my little girl into the ladies' bathroom and I just don't say anything because I don't want to appear to be hateful or bigoted. Now, like my wife and I were talking about that, and I was like, if you're logicking yourself into a position of that, maybe check your logic. But also, if you can't seem to find the right logical position necessarily, you don't have enough information, you're probably going to have to trust your gut at some point, right? You're going to have to make decisions based on the best, information that you have and move forward, because there's no Bible to tell you how to do everything in life. There's no Bible that gives you a solution. I'm sorry to offend all the Christians here, but there's no Bible that really gives you the solutions to all of the problems of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. There's no Bible that gives you a correct answer of how to deal with transsexuals in bathrooms, right? Sometimes, there are good laws, there are good morals, and there are ethics we can base things on. But at some point, you probably are going to have to also trust your gut.
Yeah, I agree completely. And there's a reason why we have a gut that, has us with certain instincts, and we have an intuition for a certain reason. And it's funny that, smarter people can reason themselves into whatever they do, so like if you do something stupid, then there will be a million different things going off in your brain that will eventually get you to justifying what you just did. If, you are a little bit, if you're a little bit smarter than the average bear.
Yeah, there's a phrase for that. I hate to cut you off, but
No,
it's that it's like why the people like Sam Harris will do say such stupid things. Or Albert Einstein actually wrote an article on why he was a socialist, right? And so stupid, stupid, right? Very stupid.
I like that you got that in there.
Yeah. But here's the thing: like, smart people are good at justifying their stupid behaviors and their stupid ideas, right? Smart people are good at justifying their stupid ideas. So they'll find a million different explanations for why socialism is a brilliant idea, despite the fact that it is so obviously a stupid idea. George Orwell, perfect example, right? Wrote Animal Farm against Stalinistic communism, wrote 1984 against, English socialism, was a socialist. Okay, like, knock, knock. Is anyone home upstairs, George? How can you miss this? We all have blind spots. We all sometimes we can logic and reason ourselves in a hole. Well, this time it wasn't real socialism, Orwell says. Fuck you, George. Like, it was, like, it's never going to work.
Yeah, that's funny. Jennifer Hawbane in the comments said, my son is reading Animal Farm right now. Yeah, I think I read that probably in middle school, and I would kind of like to go back and read some of those books. But it's, kind of to your point here, when it comes to like relationships too, because I know that, that's kind of the big thing now, is everybody wants to talk about that. But, we kind of need good people around us, and we need to be smart enough to listen to the good people around us, because I'm sure plenty of people that dated somebody that was just an absolute train wreck, and everybody around them was saying like, hey, you see this like coming off the rails, you should probably like back out or figure something else out. But we just never listen.
No, but again, like, we're a nation of believers, right? We want to have hope. We want to believe that things will be different this time. Lucy, she's going to let us kick the football, Charlie Brown. Right. And I'm guilty of this as well. Hell, I went and joined the Republican Party. Right. And my belief, maybe I am the Charlie Brown trying to kick the football. They're going to let me kick. Mitch McConnell's going to let me kick it this time. Donald Trump's going to drain the swamp this time, guys. Right. He really is. Right. Yeah. And, hope springs eternal. Right. And we're all guilty of these confirmation biases. But, I've been going back. I've been thinking about the Roman Empire a lot lately. And I'll say that the things that give me, whenever I have there's an intellectual darkness, whenever I cannot find the answers, when I'm struggling to find reason in an unreasonable world, I return to the classics. And when I return to the classics, or even you could say that Animal Farm and George Orwell 1984, these are the classics to an extent, right? Fahrenheit 451. When I return to the classics, I usually will find, something, the thing that I've been looking for, right? That, many times I feel like this deep sense of longing that I'm missing something. I'm not understanding something about the world, or that the things that I believed aren't making sense in context. And usually that's due to my own ignorance. It's due to my inability to sort of to intellectualize, or to have a sound foundation for what it is that I am trying to accomplish or justify it or explain. So I guess my long roundabout way of saying, what I'm trying to say in a long roundabout way here is that, usually if you go back to the classics, read the great philosophers of old, go back and read, the Greeks, the Romans, the Aristotles, the Platos, the Socrates, the George Orwells, somebody that I really enjoy and appreciate, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And Ralph Waldo Emerson, I think more than anything, has probably given me the most comfort in dark times. In his article, or his pamphlet on self-reliance, because to string it back to what I was talking about earlier, this concept of incongruities, right? Dealing with Ayn Rand says this, but Rothbard says this, and they disagree with one another. Who do I believe? Oh, right. He talked about this concept of inconsistency, and I say this quote probably at least once or twice a month in podcasts, but I think it's worth bears repeating. Right? He talks about consistency, which I valued so much in my early Ron Paul days. And that was everything we loved about Ron Paul. Consistency, consistent, right? But Ralph Waldo Emerson, you can be consistently wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So Ralph Waldo Emerson says, sorry about the dogs there.
No, that's okay.
We got French bulldogs here. Foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of simple minds. Right? It is the tool of philosophers and little statesmen and divines. So in it, he's kind of arguing that these people are that people who value consistency cannot be great, because all of the speak what you believe in hard words today, though it may contradict everything that you said yesterday, and then because that's what you believe today. And then they'll say, oh, well, you are sure to be misunderstood. Well, is that so wrong to be misunderstood? Jesus was misunderstood. Socrates was misunderstood, right? Plato was misunderstood. Every great and pure and true soul has been misunderstood. And so like I become more comfortable with incongruities and with absurdities, and being called not a real libertarian 10 times a day. I've only got called it once today, right? Like I should be excommunicated, someone tweeted at me today. And so I feel more comfortable with that, because when I go back to the classics, I find these that I find answers, and I find even sometimes more incongruities. But I at least I feel more peaceful, or I feel like I understand things a little bit better than I did before when I go back to the classics, and when I accept the inconsistencies of an inconsistent world.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing about like the whole libertarian ideology, is that I think we aspire for everything to be perfect, and we just do not live in a perfect world, unfortunately.
Yep. No, that's true. And I mean that's that speaks to current affairs more than anything. I think if you look at Israel versus Palestine, it's a scenario where there doesn't seem to be a really good answer to the solution. There seems to be better answers. It's the land of no good options in many ways. And I've been reading a lot of, I talked about this on my show this morning. I've been reading a lot of Friedrich Nietzsche, this concept of beyond good and evil. So when you kind of like get above the squabbling, and you put the oh, well, I'm a Jew, so I support them, or I'm a Muslim, I support them, I'm a leftist socialist, so I support freeing Palestine, or I'm a conservative right-wing fundie, so I support Israel, what have you. Or this side murdered this many babies. Well, this side murdered many more babies. Well, look, if you can get beyond this idea of good and evil for just a moment, right? And I know that this turns all of our fundamental morality on its head, but when you get beyond good and evil, you see two groups of people in a civilizational struggle for survival. They are fighting against one another as an existential crisis, right? And if I don't place my own values, which are what Nietzsche would call the slave morality. If I don't place my own values, my own good and evil morality, which is what Nietzsche, he called good and evil, this idea of this was the morality of the slave, of Christianity, and what we exist under today, that these are the good guys, those are the bad guys. When you look at it from the concept of the master morality, the morality of the warrior, you can understand why people act the way that they act. They're acting in their own rational self-interest. Right? They're acting in a way that is to function the most appropriately for themselves individually and for their culture and their tribe or their nation state or their terrorist group or what have you. And so the world makes a little bit more sense, and it becomes harder to sort of issue judgments for even the most despicable of acts being initiated by either side. And one has to just wonder, like, what would you do if you were in that scenario? If you were on either side of the conflict, you might be acting the exact same way that either of them were acting. Are we truly better people, right? Or are we simply, are we as Americans removed from the savagery of the geopolitical region, simply, acting in a way so as to cast our own moral aspersions on people who are in a struggle for survival? If I used this analogy with Spike Cohen this morning, and then I got to run.
Yeah.
But if we were, and Spike disagreed, and I disagreed on this, if we were, as a human race, the entire planet, this would be the only thing that would bring us all together. If there was an alien invasion, okay,
Right.
if there was an alien planet that was sending, it's a ugly planet, it's a bug planet, right? Starship Troopers. Okay, so the bugs have sent an asteroid full of bugs to Earth, and they've just from Klendathu, and they've destroyed Buenos Aires. Okay, so this is war, right? It's war. We're going to war. Would we use all means and any tools necessary to eliminate the bug threat? Right? Would we do absolutely anything, commit any act of savagery for our own individual defense? Beyond the concept of good or evil, would we use nukes and destroy entirely the bug planet? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we would. Now, Spike says no. He says you can blow up the bug ships and the bug asteroids, but you can't kill all the innocent bug civilians, right? Now, the bug civilians aren't my target, but they shouldn't have been standing there, right? And I can't help the fact that the bugs, that the brain bugs are standing amongst the civilian bugs, the regular cockroaches, right? And it's not to compare Hamas or anything like that to cockroaches, but the point is that, beyond the concept of good and evil, when you look at many of the problems that we face today, you will simply see people acting in their own best interest, their own self-defense, acting as if they were animals, and perhaps really we are just animals.
Yeah, and like you said, I think a lot of people kind of bake their own morality and presuppositions into it, when sometimes the simplest explanation is the most likely and logical. So I know you're on a little bit of a time squeeze, Austin. I really appreciate your time. Go ahead, give your plugs, and we'll get on out of here.
Yeah, check me out, the Wake Up America Show at rumble.com/AP for Liberty. That's AP, the number 4. Rumble.com/AP for Liberty. We're every Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time on the show. So we look forward to seeing you then.
All right, awesome, Austin. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll get to do it again sometime. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, take care.